Good day, everyone. Like Dewale was pointing out, Nigeria is quite literally in crisis. We must commit to the rule of law. There's just no way around it. The rule of law is the key to a viable democracy, and it is fundamental to political stability. Any discussion of the future of Nigeria as a viable state cannot exclude the process to establish the rule of law. A multi-ethnic, multi-religious society like Nigeria, with several minority groups, cannot operate successfully without the rule of law. And let's just talk about definitions so we're clear, because it could mean something different to other people. The rule of law is the principle whereby all members of a society are considered equally subject to publicly disclose legal codes and processes. No one is above the law, simply stated. Recognized principles of the rule of law include just laws, accountability, open government, and accessible justice. There must be clear, publicized, stable, evenly applied laws. There must be security for persons and property. There must be human rights. We must also protect our contracts. Laws must be consistent with international human rights principles, and the government must be accountable. The government and the private actors must be equally accountable under the rule of law. There must be open government, accessible, fair, efficient processes for law enactment and enforcement. And justice must be accessible. There must be timely justice by independent, ethical, competent actors with adequate resources. Where rule of law exists, the features we see must include a binding written constitution, not something that has the name, but an actual working constitution. There must be separation of powers, and not just in like a line item, but it must work, in fact. And this may include decentralization. We were talking about that regarding law enforcement. And recognition of functions of state. It doesn't appear that this government understands that it has the function of protecting populations from genocide and from human rights abuses. Rule of law also features transparency. What does it affect? The rule of law affects the economy, quite frankly, just about everything. It affects the economy, it affects stability, it affects development. The economy, a weak rule of law discourages investment and innovation. There must be transparent budget processes to support effective court systems and reduce corruption. Must be accountability in financial processes, and all of this depends on the rule of law. And as for stability, we all see what's going on. Insecurity breeds regression, increase in crime, and escalation of conflict and violence. And rule of law, where it's non-existent, affects development, because sustainable development is not possible without functioning and effective institutions to dispense justice without fear of favor to every person. Now, there are so many problems in Nigeria in this area. There's quite frankly a general breakdown of the rule of law. There's a lack of a working constitution. We do not function under a constitutional democracy. There's ineffective legal systems and ineffective judicial systems. Frankly, they're ill-equipped and in some cases, and there's inadequate training. There's a lack of official, reliable statistics to measure how we're doing. There's a lack of performance measurement and assessment. And the big one, corruption. It's a big problem affecting this area. There's also lack of competent actors. People just get put in positions and we don't know that they can do the jobs. And another big one for me personally is the lack of political will. And I say that because we must reject the failures of the rule of law. We must reject the sectional killings. I speak about the Southern Kaduna killings, the killings in the southern states, the forced displacement of persons, We just have to say no. We must reject these things. The escalation of conflicts and violence. I remember the Middle Belt killings probably still going on. We cannot keep up with that. And executive lawlessness. And I remember the suspension of the Chief Justice of Nigeria. That's not the rule of law. You cannot have arbitrary use of power. And suppression of free speech has no place in the rule of law. What are they afraid of? How about the rearresting of Omoyele Sowore in violation of an order of court? The rule of law has broken down. And we must revamp our broken justice system. We have outdated codes. We have corruption soaring. We have incompetence. And we have underfunding in key agencies. The insecurity and insurgencies, we have to say no. There's Boko Haram, there's Fulani herdsmen, there's the militants, there's the kidnappings. These things are failures that we must reject. And of course, the big one that's been there forever, election malpractices, the manipulation of rules, the rigging, the vote buying, the violence and the coercion. Those are failures of the rule of law. Now, in thinking of what we can do, we must establish processes to implement things like education of people. By constant practice and planting ideas, we must aim for sociological conditions where most people believe that no individual or group is above the law. And we must have a process to check power. There must be power constraint. There's a need to establish a legal apparatus to compel compliance. We must compel compliance to make people believe us we want them to. And this is important. Just as important is to institute viable measures to check the excesses of unbridled power on every side. Practical applications include codification of laws, values, and ethics, judicial reform, law enforcement reorganization, and citizen empowerment. We must regulate access to markets and services and invest in enforcement processes. We must think of ourselves and reorganize our cultural biases, gender discussions, the youth, where they come in. And we have a culture of governance. We adulate public power. All of that we must change by empowering the people. And social justice initiatives have a front role in the rule of law, protection of marginalized and vulnerable populations. And we must have a way to assess how we're doing. Process assessments, we must have measured, identifiable elements based on goals we have set. And we must combat corruption. We must empower people, cut the red tape, put sanctions in place, educate the citizenry, and sometimes use technology. If you have to pay something on your phone, you may cut out one more person to give a bribe. And we must invest in independent scrutiny of how we're doing.
Thank you so much.
And open government. Thank you.